Yo everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Six Path Weeb, and you're tuning in to another epic fanfic dive. Today's What If is a game changer. What if Naruko's scroll training gave her the edge? Before we jump in, quick disclaimer. This content is purely for entertainment and discussion. I don't own any of the anime footage used, all rights belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get into it. Thud. 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 If Kakashi-sensei can't help me, then who can? Mumbled a short, spiky-haired blonde girl wearing an orange and blue tracksuit. Her name was Naruko Uzumaki, and she was steadily punching a wooden training post with evenly timed strikes. Thud. 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 It's all because Sasuke's an Uchiha and has a special ability. So what? He's just another ninja with a fancy set of eyes, shouted Naruko, frustration slipping into her voice. She threw one last punch, strong enough to crack the wooden post, then slowly leaned against it and slid down into the soft grass below. Why? Why is it always me who feels alone? Why does it have to be Naruko Uzumaki who ends up overlooked? Why only me? She whispered, her voice catching as she brushed away a few tears. Curling up near the tree, she tried to gather her thoughts. Sniff. Maybe if I win the Chunin exams, Kakashi-sensei will want to train me more, Naruko said to herself, a spark of determination lighting up her face. She jumped to her feet and began stretching. Yeah. That's it. If I win, maybe then Kakashi-sensei will train me even more than Sasuke. She thought, getting into position, ready to sprint. Gurgle. Naruko blinked and looked down at her stomach. It rumbled again, clearly demanding attention. Og, I'm starving, but I can't stop now, she muttered, glancing toward the village. She debated whether to run to Ichiraku Ramen and back quickly or push through the hunger and continue training. She had a full month to prepare starting tomorrow. Looking down thoughtfully, she sighed. If only I could be in two places at once. Suddenly, a light bulb metaphorically lit up above her head. That's it. Shadow clone jutsu. How could I forget? She exclaimed, clapping one fist into her palm. With a practiced motion, she formed the hand sign for her favorite technique, well, second favorite, because she still found the transformation technique pretty amusing. Poof. The small clearing quickly filled with dozens of identical Narukos. She looked around at her clones and then sighed. Ever since the Forest of Death incident, when that strange enemy had touched her during the second phase of the exam, her chakra control hadn't been the same. Okay, everyone but one, dispel, she commanded, rubbing her forehead. Poof. Now only one clone remained, standing upright with a salute. Ready for duty, the clone said cheerfully, mimicking a professional ninja's posture. Naruko grinned. Clone Naruko, this is a high priority mission. Your task is to bring back 10 miso ramens, immediately. If you fail, we might never taste ramen again. Mission accepted, said the clone with wide eyes, dashing off in a burst of speed, leaving a small dust cloud behind. Naruko scratched the back of her head. Wait. How's she gonna pay? She mumbled. Oh well. Guess I'll find out when she gets back. Turning her attention to her training ground again, Naruko smiled softly. This place had been her little hideaway ever since before the academy graduation exam. Surrounded by tall trees and marked by a sparkling waterfall at the far end, it was peaceful and perfect for training. She crouched into a runner's position and began a countdown in her head. 3, 2, 1, go. She launched forward with impressive speed for a Genin, already nearing the level of an experienced one. Her steps were quick, her arms pumping to maintain her pace. Come on, Naruko. You've got this. You can push harder, she told herself out loud, determination fueling her. She kept up the pace for several minutes until suddenly, her foot caught a root and she stumbled, clutching her head. Ow, what was that? She muttered, sitting up. But then her expression changed. Her scraped knee was forgotten as a vivid memory flashed in her mind, her clone visiting Ichiraku's, being given a free bowl by Ayame after forgetting money, crashing into a crate of supplies, and, then, popping out of existence. Her eyes widened. Wait. Did I just remember what my clone experienced? I thought shadow clones were just physical copies. I really need to read more about this jutsu, she said to herself. She had only learned the creation part, she never paid attention to the full explanation. Never mind. I'll just go ask Grandpa Hokage now, she declared, heading toward the Hokage Tower on the other side of the village. 3 hours later. I should have just run here in the first place, Naruko muttered, now approaching the Hokage tower in the evening light. She looked up and spotted her beloved grandfather figure, Hiruzen Sarutobi, but before she could call out to him, he disappeared. Well, guess it's time for Operation FS, she said with a sigh. Looks like I'll need to use the Forbidden Scroll plan after all. She moved quietly to the back of the tower. The same construction scaffolding was still there, exactly how she had sneaked in last time. Even the same open window at the top was left unchecked. Gigi's definitely been Hokage for too long if windows like these keep getting missed, she whispered to herself with a small chuckle. Naruko spotted the ledge she needed to grab and saw the ramp nearby. With a short sprint, she ran up the ramp, leapt up, and grabbed the ledge. Twisting mid-air, she spotted the next platform and pushed off to land safely. Rolling into a crouch, she came to a stop at the center of the stone platform. She rose to her feet and looked at the nearby window. Peeking inside and listening for voices, Naruko carefully slipped in, avoiding any noise. Creeping toward the Hokage's office, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a special key, a perfect replica of her grandpa's, down to every little detail. Inserting it into the door's lock, she turned it slowly and opened the door with practiced quiet. Shutting it behind her, she crossed the room to a large bookcase filled with village scrolls and documents. She unlocked the bottom drawer, revealing another hidden lock inside near the back. She inserted the key once more and twisted it gently. Clink. Taking the key out, she watched as a hidden drawer slid open behind the bookcase. Inside was the restricted scroll, along with 3 other scrolls that had her name written on them. While she already knew that this was the new hiding place for the restricted scroll, Naruko was genuinely surprised to find 3 scrolls addressed specifically to her. With a small shrug, she tucked the scrolls into the pockets of her orange jacket. She then carefully picked up the restricted scroll and eagerly opened it, eyes scanning the text about the shadow clone technique. She was stunned. How had she never noticed this before? Her shadow clones could be used for training purposes. Well, maybe not physical training, but the scroll explained that the technique was originally created by the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, as a reconnaissance tool. By sending a clone ahead, one could scout an area safely, and when the clone disappeared, the memories it collected would return to the original user. Naruko wouldn't have thought of using it for study and learning unless the scroll had explained it. Her excitement grew. She could actually catch up, or maybe even surpass, Sasuke. Sure, he could copy any style of ninjutsu, genjutsu, or taijutsu, but he couldn't memorize the details like she could through her clones. She could learn almost anything in just a few hours. Caught up in her thoughts, she didn't notice the cautionary notes listed in the scroll. Yes, yes, yes. I'm going to be the greatest Hokage ever, Naruko exclaimed, jumping to her feet with enthusiasm. She scratched the back of her hand absent-mindedly and flinched slightly at the sting. Ouch, she muttered, dropping the restricted scroll as she instinctively shook her hand. To her surprise, the portraits of the Hokage began to shimmer, the marks she had accidentally left on them seeming to vanish. All except for her grandfather figure's portrait. Poof. Thud. 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 3 scrolls popped out from the now clean portraits. Naruko stared at the scrolls in amazement. Each one seemed to be sealed for someone with matching traits, yet she had managed to open them. But how? She didn't think she was part of the Senju or Namikaze families. So how did the scrolls respond to her? Curious, she quickly gathered the scrolls and tucked them into her jacket. A glance through their contents revealed some fascinating techniques. The first one was the Rasengan. The instructions made it look easy to understand, but being part of the restricted scroll meant it must be challenging to master. Another technique was the Hiraishin no Jutsu, although it mentioned that one needed an advanced understanding of sealing techniques to even begin replicating it. The third was Edo Tensei, which involved temporarily bringing back past shinobi using a unique summoning method, although the scroll made it clear that it was highly specialized and complex. Those 3 stood out the most. While the infinite darkness illusion sounded interesting, Naruko had always struggled with chakra control, and genjutsu just wasn't her strong suit. Satisfied with what she'd found, Naruko pulled out her notepad, the same one she usually kept for writing prank ideas, and flipped through the worn pages. Carefully, she jotted down the steps for Rasengan, Hiraishin, and Edo Tensei. Almost done, Naruko. Just need to put the scroll back and head out, she whispered to herself, heart racing as she returned the restricted scroll to its compartment and locked it. Standing up, she gently wiped her handprint off her Gigi's portrait and used her key to quietly unlock the door. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her, silently moving through the building toward the open window. Climbing through, she carefully crossed the platform, then hopped onto the ledge and dropped down to a nearby ramp, sliding smoothly to the ground below. Her heartbeat finally began to slow. She had made it out without setting off any alarms. Thank goodness Gigi took the Anbu with him today. I would have been caught right away otherwise, Naruko said softly, smiling as she made her way toward the steps that led to Konoha. An hour later. Ugh. These steps take forever, Naruko muttered, stretching her arms behind her head as she wandered toward her apartment. She considered heading straight to her training ground instead. She had set up a makeshift shelter there, and if she stayed out, she could train non-stop. Deciding that was the better option, she headed home just to leave a note for her Gigi to find. Naruko's apartment. Unlocking the door, Naruko stepped inside and turned on the lights. She walked through the small space and into her room, quickly spotting her travel bag. She filled it with a few extra jumpsuits and some of her favorite preserved ramen. Then, she knelt down and slid out a loose floorboard under her bed, revealing a small stash of supplies. Inside were 3 types of pills: chakra pills, food pills, and replenishment pills. Each had a specific use. Chakra pills restored energy, though overuse could lead to fatigue. Food pills helped stave off hunger for a while, although they lacked full nutrients. The replenishment pills were designed to help the body recover and replenish itself over time, but came with their own side effects if used too frequently. She tucked a few of each into her bag. With everything packed and ready, she glanced around her apartment once more before slipping out, excitement building for the days of training ahead. Next to the supply of medicinal pills was her hidden money box, which held hundreds of thousands of yen she had carefully saved since childhood. Alongside the money was her fox mask. Naruko never quite understood why she chose that particular mask when she was younger, it had simply felt right. She picked up the mask and held it to her face as she walked into the bathroom. Looking at her reflection, she tried to act indifferent, but the mask somehow suited her. After tossing the fox-themed Anbu mask into her travel bag, she lifted the floorboard again and retrieved her extensive medical supply collection, all securely sealed within a scroll. She tucked it neatly into her bag. When Naruko was younger, she often helped injured animals in and around the forests near Konoha. Over time, that hobby grew into a deeper interest in basic medical techniques for both animals and people. With all her items gathered, Naruko zipped up the bag, stood tall, and walked toward her apartment's entrance. As she passed the light switch, she flicked it off, then closed and locked the door behind her. Naruko began walking in the direction of the training grounds, giving the impression to any passing ninja that she was heading for a routine practice session. However, she passed all the regular training areas and broke into a sprint, heading for her secret location. After about an hour of running, she finally arrived at her private training ground. Well, I guess I'll rest now. It's getting late, Naruko murmured, glancing at the night sky where a few stars had just begun to shine. 8 hours later. Yawn. Why did I get up so early? Naruko groaned as she tumbled out of her handmade hammock, which was well hidden in a cave behind a waterfall. Adjusting her jacket and feeling around for the scrolls she always kept close, Naruko nodded to herself. Guess this is a good time to read them, she thought while strolling along the cool mist of the waterfall. In the clearing, she carefully placed the scrolls in 2 separate piles, one for those that had fallen from the portraits of the Hokage, and the other for the ones found with the forbidden scroll. Scratching her head thoughtfully, Naruko debated which pile to read first. The Hokage had always been her heroes, and she could always read the others later. She grabbed the 3 Hokage scrolls and tried to open them. But nothing happened. What? But they fell after oh wait, maybe I need some chakra activation, she said, gently smacking her forehead in realization. Then, she formed the hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a soft flurry of puffs, over 200 clones appeared around her. Alright everyone. Let's focus on tree walking training, okay? Kaka-sensei said my chakra control still needs improvement, so this'll help, Naruko instructed. The clones nodded and scattered to nearby trees to begin their exercises. Turning back to the scrolls, Naruko took a calming breath. Her heart beat a little faster. Raising her hand to her mouth, she focused a tiny amount of chakra and gently bit her thumb, just enough to activate the technique. She touched the scrolls with her thumb, allowing the energy to channel through. In an instant, 3 bursts of smoke filled the air. And standing before her were 3 of the most legendary figures in Konoha's history. The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The second Hokage, Tobirama Senju. And finally, her favorite, the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Naruko stood frozen, wide-eyed in disbelief. Her thoughts raced. Wait. Are these ghosts? She gasped, and without thinking, dove headfirst into the lake, making Minato's sweat drop in mild amusement. The three Hokage exchanged glances, equally surprised to see one another summoned together. Minato was especially shocked. He'd assumed only his scroll could be activated, not the others. That meant Naruko might be connected to the Senju bloodline. While Minato pondered this, Tobirama sighed and, with a swift water-style technique, summoned a gentle stream to lift Naruko from the lake and place her on solid ground. Naruko's eyes were wide as she floated, still somewhat convinced these were spirits. But they didn't seem ghostly. And they could use jutsu. Hashirama smiled kindly and gave a small wave. Hello there. I guess since you managed to summon me, Tobirama, and who are you? He asked, glancing at Minato in curiosity. Minato chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his head. Oh, right. We never met. I'm Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, he said proudly, turning to show the kanji on his haori. Naruko's eyes sparkled at the sight. Spirit or not, that was seriously cool. Hashirama tilted his head. If you're the fourth, and no longer among the living, who's the fifth? He asked, puzzled. Minato blinked. He wasn't sure either, but Naruko stepped in confidently. Gigi's the Hokage, she said, still dangling upside down a bit. Gigi? Hashirama repeated curiously. Naruko blinked, then remembered, not everyone knew she called the third Hokage Grandpa. Oh, I mean the third Hokage. Even though he's older, he's really wise and still pretty awesome, she said with a smile, though a bit dizzy from being upside down. Looking to the second Hokage, she asked to be set down, which he did after a moment's consideration. Naruko landed headfirst into the soft ground. Ow. Seriously? She muttered with a puffed cheek. Databayo. For some reason, Minato smiled warmly at the phrase. Tobirama turned to Hashirama with a thoughtful expression. She's definitely from your side of the family, he said, prompting laughter from Hashirama and a chuckle from Minato. Naruko pouted a little. Okay. Can someone please explain how you're all here? Hashirama stepped forward with a gentle expression. Well, it appears you activated 3 special scrolls. These scrolls were designed to be opened only by those related to us, either through your mother or your father, he explained calmly. Tobirama took over. In simple terms, your family. These scrolls were created to offer support to our descendants in times of need. So, what made you summon us? Naruko scratched the back of her head, grinning sheepishly. Well, I kinda found them by accident. I was testing what shadow clones really do when they disappear. At this, Tobirama's expression shifted into surprise, and he took a step closer. The other 2 Hokage followed, curiosity clear in their eyes. Tobirama locked eyes with Naruko. Why would you need to know what the shadow clone technique does? With your current chakra levels and limited control, you shouldn't even be attempting it, said Tobirama, raising an eyebrow as he noticed Naruko staring at him in confusion before she pointed in the direction of her clones. When the former Hokage turned to see just how many clones she had created, his expression quickly shifted to one of alarm. Naruko, release your clones, one at a, Tobirama began, but was interrupted by the simultaneous poof sounds of hundreds of clones vanishing at once. All the Hokage turned to Naruko, expecting her to collapse from the overwhelming feedback of memories and energy caused by the release of so many shadow clones. Instead, Naruko stood calmly with her head slightly tilted, her expression unbothered. She didn't feel drained or dizzy, on the contrary, she felt more in tune with her chakra, her control noticeably sharper. It actually made her feel calmer, rather than more energized. What? Naruko asked, puzzled by the stunned expressions on their faces. How? Tobirama murmured, watching in disbelief as Naruko remained completely unaffected by the intense chakra feedback that should have overwhelmed her. Hashirama broke into a wide smile. If Naruko could endure that kind of challenge without any signs of discomfort, she might one day rise to the ranks of a legendary shinobi. Minato's eyes shone with pride. His daughter had shown remarkable resilience, a strength as enduring as diamond. Tobirama quickly recovered from his surprise. Well, he said with a smirk, training you for the next month is going to be quite the experience. The other Hokage shared his enthusiasm with matching smiles. Naruko, however, suddenly had the distinct feeling she was about to face one of the most intense challenges of her life. Faster, Naruko. Minato called out as he threw his Hiraishin kunai toward her. Naruko was running purely on determination and willpower. It had been 10 days since her training had begun, and the cage were already impressed by how quickly she was progressing, even without the usual support of her shadow clones. When the cage first started training Naruko, they discovered she lacked basic survival skills. This became apparent when they asked her to find some food on her own. As Naruko later realized, the cage training her were actually enhanced shadow clones. After waiting half an hour, they finally found Naruko a few miles away from their original location, engaged in a tense encounter with 3 large wild animals. How she managed to wander that far in search of food remained a mystery. During one of the early training sessions, Tobirama asked Naruko who had taught her what she knew. At that, the young girl fell quiet and gave only hushed, hesitant answers. The first and second Hokage felt genuine compassion for her, but the fourth Hokage, Minato, knelt down and wrapped her in a gentle embrace, overcome with emotion. When Naruko asked why he was crying, Minato softly revealed that he was her father and explained how her mother should have been there to care for her, if circumstances had allowed. That night, Naruko let her emotions flow freely, grieving the loss of a connection she never had the chance to experience. Yet, in that moment, she also found comfort in finally meeting her father, even if in an unusual way. On the second day of training, Tobirama asked Naruko to summon as many clones as she could, just like she had done the previous day. Surprisingly, despite using the same amount of chakra, she could only summon 50 this time, down from 200. This puzzle gave Naruko something new to investigate, along with her many other training goals. Flashback to 9 days ago. Ugh! Why can't I summon as many clones as yesterday? I know my control is better now, even if just a little, Naruko exclaimed, continuing to attempt summoning 200 clones again, but the maximum she could reach was around 100. While Naruko pushed herself, Tobirama sat calmly, sensing her chakra for anything unusual. He noticed how her chakra flowed from her core and detected an odd disruption. Her chakra was being scrambled at the source. Calling over Hashirama and Minato, Tobirama motioned to Naruko, who sat on the ground, visibly worn out. With a thoughtful look, Tobirama gently lifted her jacket and shirt just enough to reveal her stomach so the other cage could see what he had found. Hashirama, who had only received basic sealing knowledge from his wife Mito, was unsure what he was looking at. Tobirama, on the other hand, recognized a highly complex seal, one that disrupted a person's chakra flow. For someone who was a Jinchuriki, like Naruko, it would make it difficult to access certain chakra energies. While the seal was new to Tobirama, he knew it would take time to counteract it. Minato, however, recognized it instantly. Carefully placing his hand over the seal, he began to undo it, moving with precision. As he did, he noticed a second seal hidden underneath, the type of seal used to prevent the awakening of unique abilities in children. Only high-level leaders, like clan heads or Hokage, would know about this kind of technique. Possibly Danzo as well. Naruko, I'm going to release both seals, alright? Minato said gently, locking eyes with her. She nodded in understanding. With a controlled motion, Minato deactivated both seals on her stomach. He double-checked to ensure the seal containing the 9 tails remained secure before rejoining the other cage. Naruko slowly began to feel a shift, her chakra returning to a more natural, unrestricted flow. As she glanced at a nearby puddle, she noticed something else, her whisker-like marks had faded from her cheeks. She also saw the cage exchanging glances during their discussion. Deciding to rest for a bit, Naruko lay down and closed her eyes, only to find herself experiencing a new kind of awareness. In her mind, she could somehow see the cage standing nearby, like a mental map. As she focused, the cage approached and held something out to her. Opening her eyes, she saw a piece of blank paper being held above her. Turning to look at them, Hashirama began to explain. Alright, Naruko. This is called chakra paper. It's made from trees that have absorbed chakra over time and can reveal your elemental affinities when you channel your chakra into it. All you need to do is send some chakra into the paper and we'll see your nature types, Hashirama explained with a smile. Naruko took the paper and gently infused it with chakra. The cage watched closely. The paper split into 3 parts. One section was soaked with water, another turned into dry earth, and the third crackled with electricity, curling into a small ball. She had affinities for wind, water, earth, and lightning. Before anyone could even comment, the water and earth parts slipped from her hands and landed together on the ground, forming a small plant. Hashirama jumped with excitement. He had finally found someone who could learn his techniques. Though his time was limited to 30 days, he knew he could pass on something valuable to Naruko. Naruko, you can do even better, called out Minato, as he swiftly moved around the training field using his teleportation technique, tossing more kunai toward Naruko while skillfully avoiding small water and wood dragon constructs. Naruko met the challenge with determined eyes, gracefully evading the barrage of techniques from her mentors. She recalled how far this intense training had brought her. Hashirama, Minato, and Tobirama had instructed her clones in elemental manipulation, dividing them into groups of 50 to master each of her elemental affinities. She particularly enjoyed Hashirama's medical training sessions. Tobirama's chakra control exercises had been demanding, often leaving her completely soaked as she scaled waterfalls while carrying all 3 former Hokage on her back, a task that truly tested her patience and strength. Despite the challenge, it sharpened her skills immensely. Her father's taijutsu lessons suited her natural agility well and became a valuable part of her routine. She had also received in-depth Fuinjutsu lessons from both Tobirama and Minato, along with a glimpse into the fascinating realm of space-time ninjutsu, which quickly became her favorite subject. Thanks to all this training, she had grown significantly. Her abilities now matched those of a capable Chunin, although her field experience still hovered around mid-Genin level. Overall, her progress placed her at a strong high Genin rank. Smiling to herself as she maneuvered between her sensei's techniques, Naruko's confidence grew. She was ready. She knew she could take on Neji. Chunin Exam Finals, Stadium. The stadium buzzed with anticipation. Every 6 months, the Chunin exams were held in a different hidden village, offering Kage the chance to showcase promising shinobi to potential allies and observers. The third Hokage, Hiruzen, exhaled quietly as he gazed over the crowd. It had been an entire month since he'd last seen Naruko Uzumaki, and concern gnawed at him. He had hoped to assign Jiraiya to train her after learning Kakashi had taken Sasuke under his wing. However, Jiraiya had declined, and now, Hiruzen feared Naruko would be at a disadvantage. Looking at the crowd, Hiruzen noticed growing restlessness. The exams needed to begin soon, or the atmosphere could sour, something the village couldn't afford. He turned his gaze toward the group of contestants. Only 6 Genin were present. Naruko, Sasuke, and Dosu from the Sound Village were absent. He knew that if Sasuke arrived late, people would make allowances due to his lineage. But if Naruko were late, even by the smallest margin, she would be disqualified without hesitation. Hiruzen sighed deeply, a sense of disappointment settling over him. It seemed Naruko might not get her chance to prove herself. Putting on a calm, composed expression, he stepped to the balcony's edge just as the Kazekage entered the viewing booth with his 2 guards. Raising his voice to the audience, he declared, "The Chunin exams will now begin." The crowd erupted with excitement at his announcement. He stepped back and took his seat, waiting for the battles to commence. Soon, the proctor of the final round stepped forward to address the Genin. He was a tall man with shoulder-length hair that framed his face and thoughtful brown eyes. He wore his forehead protector like a bandana and carried a senbone between his lips. His attire was the standard Jonin uniform. Genma scanned the group with a laid-back expression before speaking. "All Genin except for Naruko Uzumaki and Neji Hyuga, please proceed to the waiting area," he said. The others moved away, leaving only Neji on the field. Neji stood calmly, arms crossed. His dark hair was tied loosely, falling to mid-back. He wore a black forehead protector snugly on his brow, a khaki overshirt layered over a dull blue shirt with mesh armor underneath. Dark brown shorts, blue shinobi sandals, and neatly wrapped bandages on his right arm, chest, and leg completed his outfit. For a moment, Neji smirked, assuming Naruko had backed out or simply wouldn't show up after the 1-month break. Genma looked around and, seeing no sign of Naruko, began to make the official call. Winner by default, Neji Hyu. A sharp thunk interrupted him as a kunai embedded itself in the ground at his feet. Genma quickly turned to trace its origin and spotted a lone figure standing atop the cage's observation box. The figure appeared to be a Jonin, wearing an Anbu-style mask and the standard shinobi uniform, minus the Chunin flak jacket. On her back, there was no visible Uzumaki symbol, adding to the mystery. What caught Genma's attention most, however, was the mask. It was shaped like a fox, a type of mask rarely worn by anyone, especially in a public setting like this. And only one person would have chosen a symbol like that. Naruko Uzumaki had arrived. Soon, a figure gracefully descended from the roof of the cage box, landing in a slight crouch with barely a sound from the impact. Genma observed the figure for a moment before noticing the bright blonde hair. Then he smiled. "Are you Naruko Uzumaki?" Genma asked, watching as the now identified Naruko tilted her head slightly. "What gave me away?" Naruko replied with a small smile, removing her mask and securing it to her belt at her hip. Genma simply looked at the young ninja and gave a light chuckle. Walking back toward the center of the arena, he stood between the two Jinan. Raising his hand, he glanced at both sides before swiftly bringing his hand down to signal the start. Both contestants stood still, facing each other as a gentle breeze rustled their hair. Neither moved, even as the match officially began. Naruko looked at Neji with a calm, unreadable expression. She slowly raised her arms to her chest, adjusting the wrappings on them, causing a flicker of confusion to pass across Neji's face. He quickly dismissed it and chose instead to speak with arrogance. Changing outfits won't change anything. Last place, Neji said confidently, a smug grin on his face. Fate has already decided that I'm going to win this match. I mean, who would support someone as insignificant as you? He waited for a reaction from Naruko. Instead, silence answered him, until she softly spoke. At least I'm not bound by someone else's rules, she said quietly. Yet her words carried clearly through the arena, reaching Neji's ears, and everyone else's. What did you just say? Neji muttered, visibly unsettled, his hands clenching and unclenching with growing tension. Naruko met his eyes with steady resolve. I said, she repeated, her voice stronger this time, at least I'm not a prisoner of my own beliefs. Before Neji could respond, his legs gave out. He dropped to his knees, clutching his side as if something had shifted unexpectedly. Naruko approached calmly and gently tapped a few precise points on his shoulders and back. Then she stepped away, quietly observing. Neji was stunned. He tried to rise, but a wave of dizziness overcame him. His movement slowed, as if his limbs had forgotten how to respond. Looking up at Naruko, his frustration was clear. How did you defeat me? He asked, just as the medical team arrived, preparing to assist him toward the recovery area. Naruko paused briefly, looking down at him before turning and walking toward the Jinan stand, leaving the mystery of her technique unanswered. Neji watched her retreating figure with disbelief. He tried to stand once more but winced as his arms refused to cooperate, his strength completely gone. The audience sat in stunned silence as Naruko made her way back toward the stands. Suddenly, Ayame leapt up from the crowd, shouting with joy. Yes, Naruko-chan. We did it. We just won over 1,000,000 yen, she exclaimed happily. She and her father had placed a bold bet on Naruko's victory, odds that now paid off handsomely. Naruko stopped briefly, turned with a bright smile, and gave Ayame a thumbs up before continuing on her way. Cage booth. The third Hokage watched in astonishment. His unofficial granddaughter had just overcome the Hyuga prodigy in under half a minute, and without any obvious exertion. The Kazekage beside him was equally puzzled. What did the blonde Kunoichi just do, Hokage Dono? He asked, genuinely curious. The Hokage's eyes remained on the field, watching Neji being carefully guided away by the medics. I'm not sure, Kazekage Dono, he replied thoughtfully. But whatever it was brilliant. Jinan area. As Naruko walked toward the participants' booth, she noticed many of the other Jinan looking at her with expressions of surprise and disbelief. She understood why, after all, it wasn't every day that someone considered the underdog managed to win against a renowned prodigy in under 30 seconds. Replacing her usual neutral expression with a cheerful grin and a wave, she greeted her fellow competitors. Another thing her teachers had emphasized stood out in her mind. Friends are those who enjoy your company simply because of who you are, not because your presence boosts their self-image or status. Comrades, on the other hand, are people you work alongside and know fairly well, but haven't developed a deep personal bond with. Thinking about that, Naruko remembered the many times Kiba, Ino, Sakura, no, just Sakura now, and Sasuke had approached her not with kindness, but with harsh words and unwelcome comments. Hey everyone, how's it going? Naruko asked casually as she leaned against the balcony railing. The participants in the area were stunned. Naruko Uzumaki, who once greeted people with loud enthusiasm, now spoke in a calm, composed voice. It was a noticeable change from just a month ago. Shikamaru studied her for a moment with a thoughtful expression, then shrugged it off, deciding it was too much of a hassle to think too deeply about. Arena. Genma shook his head slightly at the brevity of the previous match. He thought he noticed something odd about the wind during the fight, but assumed it was just his imagination. Alright, will the participants Sasuke Uchiha and Gaara of the Sand please step forward? Genma announced loudly, raising his voice over the chatter of the crowd. Excitement filled the stadium as the audience waited eagerly for Sasuke's arrival. 30 seconds passed, and Sasuke still hadn't appeared. Genma glanced toward the Hokage, silently asking what to do next. Cage booth. It appears Sasuke has taken after Kakashi's habit of arriving late. It may be time to consider disqualification, the Hokage murmured as he stepped toward the balcony, prepared to make the announcement. But the Kazekage interjected politely. Please, Hokage Dono. Many people came specifically to witness the match between Sasuke Uchiha and my son Gaara. Perhaps you might consider granting a little more time? The Kazekage suggested with a respectful tone. Though it seemed unfair to the other competitors, the Hokage acknowledged that allowing some extra time could keep the audience engaged. Very well. His match will be moved to the last fight of the first round, the Hokage declared from the balcony. Attention, everyone, the match between Sasuke Uchiha and Gaara of the Sand will be held as the final match in this round. The crowd erupted in cheers at the announcement. As the Hokage returned to his seat, he could hear a familiar voice calling out in the distance. Clearly, Naruko still retained her spirited personality. Participant booth. Seriously, Grandpa. Why does he always get special treatment? Naruko called out toward the cage booth, shaking her fist toward where she knew her grandfather figure was seated. Her tone, while frustrated, remained more exasperated than angry. Everyone in the crowd turned to look at her. What? It's not my fault I say what others are thinking, Naruko said with a huff, folding her arms and returning to silence. Arena. Genma couldn't help but smile, barely holding back a laugh. Naruko certainly had a way of bringing humor into any situation. Turning his attention back to the match schedule, he addressed the Jinan booth once again. Will Shikamaru Nara and Tamari of the Sand please come forward, Genma announced, gesturing toward the center of the arena. Jinan booth. I surrender, Shikamaru said calmly, shaking his head and muttering something about things being too troublesome. He had already calculated that defeating a skilled wind user without the proper terrain or tools would be nearly impossible. Naruko nodded thoughtfully. The Nara clan was known for its intelligence and strategic thinking, and if Shikamaru didn't see a path to victory, then surrendering was simply the wisest decision. Although she had briefly considered giving him a little push for fun, she would never put a comrade at risk. Arena. Genma let out a soft chuckle. Time was clearly running out for Sasuke. With a casual shrug, Genma called out the names of the next participants, only for one of them to forfeit. Jinan booth. I forfeit, said Kankuro calmly. He had his own reasons for not revealing Crow just yet. Arena. Genma couldn't help but smile. The matches had all been surprisingly short. And the only real action came from the fight between Naruko and Neji. Even then, Naruko barely moved until the very end. It looked like Sasuke wouldn't be getting his match today. Cage booth. The Kazekage looked visibly frustrated. At this rate, they would have no choice but to disqualify Sasuke. Curse Kakashi and his chronic lateness, the Kazekage thought with a scowl, watching the Hokage make his way to the balcony. The Hokage, on the other hand, wore a subtle smile. It seemed the decision was clear. Due to Sasuke's absence, he is now officially disqualified, the Hokage announced. We will proceed with the next match, Naruko Uzumaki vs Gaara of the Sand. However, since the previous fight didn't take place, we will allow a 5-minute break before the match begins. The Hokage returned to his seat, hands resting calmly as he watched the arena. Jinan booth. Naruko was brimming with anticipation. She finally had the chance to test her skills against Gaara, unless something unexpected happened, like in Neji's case. Ha, this is going to be exciting, Naruko said to herself, bouncing lightly on the balls of her feet in preparation. After a few seconds, she paused, took a deep breath, and let herself relax. With a smooth transition, her expression shifted into one of calm determination. As Genma announced the end of the break, she leapt confidently into the arena. Genma observed the two young ninja as they faced each other, their stances steady, expressions unreadable. He gave a small nod, prepared to step in should things escalate beyond safe limits. Raising one hand to signal the start, he glanced at each competitor briefly, then dropped his arm. Begin. Naruko focused on Gaara, studying him. Her initial attack had made contact, but it hadn't done anything. That meant something unusual, perhaps Gaara had some sort of unique defense or he was like her. A Jinchuriki. If the situation called for it, she might have to rely on her own special abilities. She leaned forward, channeling a subtle amount of chakra into her limbs, then dashed forward. Slam. Naruko stood where Gaara had just been, her fist extended in a powerful punch. A sizable crater in the arena wall marked where her strike had landed. Closing her eyes for a moment, she focused, sensing Gaara's chakra signature. It was fluctuating wildly. He was upset. Opening her eyes once more, Naruko retreated to her original position. She watched Gaara emerge from the broken wall, his eyes locked on her with intensity, then he smiled with an unsettling enthusiasm. "Yes. You will help me understand myself," Gaara said loud enough for the audience to hear. Naruko simply observed him. She suspected he was a Jinchuriki too, but she needed to be certain. There were many rare abilities in the world. Quietly, she placed her hands behind her back and unsealed 2 special kunai marked with sealing scripts, holding one in each hand. She watched carefully as Gaara sent out streams of sand like tentacles toward her. The movements were erratic and harder to follow than a person's limbs. Dashing to the side, Naruko leapt over 2 of the sand extensions aimed at her midsection. With quick reflexes, she landed on one of the tendrils and sprinted along its surface toward Gaara. Seeing her strategy, Gaara immediately withdrew the strand and sent multiple tendrils flying toward her instead. Naruko responded by jumping from one to another, gaining ground with each agile leap. Now within range, Naruko sprang high into the air, briefly blending into the sunlight overhead. Ceiling, 2-point barrier. She hurled the 2 kunai, embedding them into the ground at Gaara's left and right. The seal symbols lit up, and a soft blue barrier formed around him. Gaara tried to move, to resist, but something in the barrier's energy made it harder for him to focus his chakra. As Naruko landed gracefully, she began forming a series of hand signs with purpose and precision. "Sealing technique, 5-element seal," shouted Naruko as she dashed forward, carefully timing her move so that her barrier would lose power just as she reached it. Naruko observed intently as the protective field faded, vanishing right as her fingertips were a centimeter away. Sensing the opportunity, she propelled herself with greater speed, pressing her hand firmly against Gaara's stomach. Even if she didn't land directly on his seal, the impact would temporarily disrupt his connection to his inner power and chakra. Gaara stared at her in surprise as he was gently pushed backward, his body colliding with the arena wall due to the strength Naruko had used in her focus technique. Boom! The echo of the wall impact rang throughout the stadium. Genma, the proctor overseeing the match, approached Gaara cautiously. He gently helped the red-haired young ninja away from the wall and placed 2 fingers on Gaara's neck to check for signs of consciousness. A relieved smile spread across his face as he confirmed Gaara was simply unconscious and otherwise okay. "The winner is Naruko Uzuma," Genma began to announce, but he was suddenly interrupted by a loud blast from the cage viewing area. In the next moment, many in the audience began to fall into a deep slumber, while shinobi from the Sand Village began launching a coordinated surprise attack on the Leaf Village ninja. Through the growing confusion, Naruko could clearly hear 3 urgent words echoing around her. "We're under attack." That's a wrap for the first segment, folks. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Much love to all of you. Stay tuned, stay hyped. 6 Path Weeb, signing off.